Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Well, that's something new. Okay, what we're going to have to do is get this all figured out before the countdown timer ends. You would think that I would have this down by now. I mean, I've only been doing this for what, 5 years, something like that. But anyway, happy Sunday, y'all. They keep switching up my interface here, changing things, and some things I'm not used to. There are occasions that try our souls, and this happens to be one of them. But you know what? This too shall pass. Um, First and foremost, I want to give a I want to say that there's been several states, I think 11 states that has been hit pretty hard over the last couple of days with severe weather, and I have seen reports up to 34 people have lost their lives, unfortunately. And I just wanted to um, extend my prayers to everybody who's been affected by these massive storms, the tornado outbreak. There were like 66 tornadoes that touched down yesterday and the day before, and it's not over. From everything I've seen, it's gone through Georgia. Haven't seen any more reports out of that, but everybody from Louisiana to Georgia and all the way up into Illinois has been affected. And my heart and my prayers go out to everybody who's been affected. And yeah, let's just say that. Um, Also, I wanted to give a major shout out and say thank you, Lord, that my friend Steve was not affected except for some, he said he was hit by some major wind and some rain, a lot of rain. But thankfully, everything went to the north of him. And I'm glad you're here, Steve. That's all I can say. Was very concerned yesterday. Um, Steve with Harneal Media. That's who I'm talking about. As I said, he's a friend. And I was nervous yesterday, but it takes more than a bit of weather to put Steve down. And that's one of the reasons why I love him so much. And this is just you and me talking here, okay? If you're even toying with the idea of a website, you want to set up a web store, you want to offer your products or your services or both to the public at large, well, there's no better way to do it than with a website of your own. um, it's to the point now to where everything is costing more money, and we're talking about subscriptions, we're talking about listing fees, we're talking about commissions, we're talking about all kinds of stuff in that nature, and the prices aren't going down, believe me. Not only that, a lot of these sites that want to charge you to list your project or your product, and then they want to charge you when you do sell a project or a product. This is where having your own website cuts through all of that. There are no commissions, there are no listing fees, and they're not going to advertise your competition right there while somebody's looking at your product. So there's nobody I will ever recommend other than Steve over at Harneal Media, and that's because he's awesome at what he does. He says right there, I don't stop unless the power goes out, and even then the websites stay running. He's on top of it. He's the man. What can I say? Um, Let me just say you owe it to yourself. Get over to harnealmedia.com. There's a link in every description on this channel, be it live stream or edited video. And it's that way for a reason. Okay. Do yourself a favor, get over there, hit that contact us link, and talk to Steve. He'll do you right. Trust me on this. He's very competitively priced, and I still don't know how he does everything that he does. So, yeah, thank you for doing what you do, Steve. I truly appreciate it. And you know how to get a hold of me. So, let's move on to more pleasant discussions. Let's see here. I've had a couple of people. a couple of questions here in the background. This is an open Q&A. I know I was talking about having a video ready this week, and I've got most of it shot, but it hasn't completely come to fruition. So I'm not going to promise a video this week, next week, or the week after. Just going to say, stick with me. There is more to come. Let's see here. Let's get with a real easy one to start with. So if you have any comments, questions, concerns, put them over here in the chat. And we'll get to them in due course. But Ralph Balchin says, has anybody had a Makita router rebuilt? I have crashed too. Thanks. I have not worked on Makita routers, but I have worked on Porter cable routers. And generally speaking, about the only things that can really go wrong with them is bearings and brushes. Brushes can be replaced easily. Bearings, it's another kettle of fish, but these two can be replaced fairly easily. And it depends on what the problem with the router is. If it just doesn't turn on at all, unless you've released magic smoke from inside of it and fried a board or something like that, we're talking about probably brushes. And if you've never replaced the brushes in that router, 99 times out of 100, that's the issue. And that's always going to be the cheapest first check. Take the brushes out and look at them. It obviously it depends on how much you use the router. If you don't use it much, it can last 10 years before you replace the brushes. But if you're using it every day for long periods of time, then you probably have worn out the brushes. I have two Porter cable routers from when I was using them on my old Gatton CNC. And one I kept on the CNC and the other I had on standby. And that way, if I was in the middle of a project and I had to have something done now, I could pull one router, put the other router in, do a little adjusting, and then just keep going. Buy a set of brushes and then put them in and have that on standby until the brushes wore out of the other one. Bearings are a little bit more difficult to replace. Get online and look for a manual that will show you how to remove the and replace the bearings. Also, check YouTube, believe it or not. You will often find, I mean, I replaced the bearings in my old Porter Cable random orbit sander, and I just looked on YouTube for, see, it was Porter Cable and then the model number, which I believe is 311, bearing replacement. And there was like 8 videos that showed how to replace the bearings. You may need special tools, but they're cheap. A simple bearing puller and possibly a bearing separator. And but if you have those tools at hand, you can get a bearing separator for fairly cheap at Harbor Freight or what have you. Those are generally the most common things that go out. You can sometimes burn out a winding, but that's less common. Now, Ralph, I see you say the brushes looked okay. They may look just fine. It's the length. How are they worn out? Because if you've got that much brush on there, look at a pair of new ones. They may be that long. And the spring just isn't strong enough to keep full contact with the brush on that armature. So that may be it. It may not be it. But also, Roy is absolutely 100% correct. It's a palm router, and palm routers are made to be turned on, run for a couple of minutes to dress an edge or route a profile or make a dado or whatever, and then shut off. They're not meant, they weren't designed to be run for hours and hours at a time. And it's got moving parts. Moving parts wear out. I would recommend, if this is the second one that you've gone through, let me back up for just a second. My father-in-law was an appliance repairman all of his life, and I worked with him on quite a few things. And one of the first things he taught me was when fixing something approaches half of its replacement cost, it's time to just replace it. Cut your losses because things are going to keep going. Okay. And I've found that that's true with appliances, but it's also true with most things, and especially power tools. So you might look into getting a spindle for that CNC instead of a new router. Now, I understand they are a larger investment, but again, depending upon what spindle you buy, another Makita router could very well be half of the cost of a spindle. And if it's half of the cost of a spindle, it's worth going for the other half. And I'm here to tell you, once you get a spindle, you'll never go back to a router. You'll wonder how you'll be amazed at how much you've been settling for by using a router versus a spindle. And I used a router for the first 6 years, 7 years I've been doing this. So I've had both, and I'm telling you, once you go spindle, you'll never want to go back. So I would look into it. And as far as what spindle to look at what's available for your CNC. Like Oz over here has said, he went through 2 Makitas and replaced it with a PWN spindle. I've heard a lot of people sing PWN's praises. I don't have a dog in this fight, so the brand model of spindle, I don't know. But talk to other people that have the same CNC you have, see what they've done. There are a lot of flashy, 2.2 kilowatt water cooled versus air cooled and all that. Those are kind of, um, they are important things, but what's more important is longevity. And be it air cooled or water cooled, you're going to get much more longevity out of a spindle, more torque. Yes, it's quieter. Of course, once the bit touches the wood, it gets loud. So, I mean, I don't know how much that really matters to you, but I would look into getting a spindle. Now, I'll never talk anybody out of getting, I'll never talk anybody out of getting another router to replace the one you've got, but think of it as a temporary fix. And think about a spindle. Believe me, once you try a spindle, you'll never go back. So, let's see here now. Brooks Martin has given me an interesting topic to discuss here. And we've got some people that are pretty experienced out here. And so I'd like more input on this. He says, can you talk about 3D roughing strategies, the pros and cons? Well, what I can talk about is using a roughing toolpath versus not using a roughing toolpath, and the pros and cons of the various strategies within a roughing toolpath. And so to do that, let's get over here into VCarve. I'm using VCarve Pro for this, but I will need to get over here and get something 3D. So my 3D, let's look at here. what do we got here? We'll go for a fish in a dish. Why not? Hey, I'm a poet and I know it. All right. And I'll go ahead and enlarge this so we can all see it. There we go. We got Billy Bass. All right. Let me go into my components here because I see another question out here. Rich asking, what's the difference between the U and the upside down U in the modeling component properties, i.e. brown interior versus non-colored interior? This is the combine mode, okay? The combine mode is how this model is going to interact with other models, okay? Now we can right click here and go into the properties and we can see all of them illustrated right here. The brown U's and 0 or O in this case are, this one here is merge. You're going to merge the highest points with other components. So in other words, this fish is going to merge with any other component I put on top of it or any other component underneath it. Okay. This one here is merge the lowest points. That's something we can get into on another time because merge low and multiply are topics of their own that can take an entire live stream. So we'll get into those on later dates. These over here without the brown, this is add to the previous component. This is subtract from the previous component. What this means is if I put something else on top of this model, if I have it in add, it's going to stack that second component on top of this fish. So I'll have the fish, then I'll have whatever I put on top of the fish. If I set it to subtract, whatever I put in here is going to be subtracted from the fish. If I set this model to subtract, let's take a look at it in the 3D view. We're looking at it in the 3D view right here, and we see what this looks like. If I set this to subtract, now all of a sudden, that dish has turned into a dome, and that fish is scooped out, almost like I was making a mold. And in fact, you could use this to make a mold if you really wanted to. I wouldn't do it with the dish, with the dome. I would go for the flat fish, but, what can you say? So this is showing you how it's added on top of any component below it. This is subtracting it, and this is merging the highest points. So if you look at this model, the highest points are the edges of the dish. Okay? This becomes important here because now I'm going to add a zero plane on top of this. And this is something that bears repeating. I've said it before. I'll keep saying it. The zero plane, once a zero plane is added, it becomes part of the model. Okay? It is a component. So if I come out here to the design tab and I come down here to add a plane or component with zero height covering the model, and I click on that, now you see how my material lighted up. There is a flat plane with no thickness covering the entire piece of material, but it's merging with this model. And you can see that merge happen right here. It's merging with this dish. You can see that merge occurring right there. Now, if I get into the component tree, and we can see that that zero plane has been added. So that's what these do. These are your combine modes. It's how this component is going to interact with this component. And they are separate components that you can select or deselect. Okay? So let's go back over here to the design tab, and then we'll get into Brooke's question over here. Talking about 3D roughing. Now, there are occasions where 3D roughing is important. And there are occasions where it's not important. I tend to say that it depends upon the project. Mainly because, well, let's talk about the purpose of a 3D roughing toolpath. The purpose is to hog out as much of this material as it can, a lot faster than a 3D finishing toolpath will run. And when I say that's more, it's dependent on the project. If we're looking at a real shallow carve, there may not be a lot of material to remove with a roughing toolpath. If we're looking at something real deep, and in the case of this fish, we have some detail in here, we're going to need to use some fairly small bits. We want to make things as easy on that small bit as we can. Because if I'm going to use a 1/16 inch ball nose to get in here and get some of these details, it may be a 1/16 inch tapered ball nose bit, which is a bit more robust than a standard 1/16 inch ball nose. But at the end of the day, the tip of that bit is still a 1/16 of an inch in diameter. So you'll want to remove as much of this as you can to make it as easy on the bit as possible. So it's it is very dependent. If you're doing something like a 2-foot diameter 3D barn star, and you're cutting it out of a foam material that you've stacked 2.5 inches deep, you might want to do a roughing pass just to make things easier on the bit that's going to be carving that star. If you're going to do something small that's going to be held in the hand, say the top of a small jewelry box or the back of a mirror, a hand mirror, you may not be carving something that deep, so you may not need a roughing pass. So it's kind of dependent on the project, as I said. Now, let's get into the roughing toolpath, and we'll check on a couple of things here. First things first, it's going to send me into material setup. So I'm going to double check the thickness of my material. Yes. Show a detailed summary. Yes. My XY datum is correct. I'm setting my Z0 to the material surface, and we have an issue. The total model thickness is deeper than my material thickness. So I can go about this two ways. I can go back over into the component tree, get into the properties, and change the shape height of my fish there. Or I can come over here and click the set button and enter a new thick height here. I don't want it to be 0.995. That's almost an inch tall, you might as well say. Let's go for a ½ inch. So we'll go 0.5. Now, when I click apply, let's take a look and see what this looks like. It's just changed my shape height to a ½ inch tall. Now I need to get in here and look and see, did I lose a bunch of detail? It has flattened it. I might lose some detail, but I'm not going to carve all the way through my material. So I think I can go ahead and accept that. Next thing I want to look at is my model position. The model is sitting up here where this light brown is. This is uncarved material. That's what's going to be left behind down here. So I prefer to put a little bit of a gap, 10 thousandths of an inch, 0.01. That would eliminate any flat spots on anything that's close to the top up here. And we'll click OK. Hello. There we go. Now, what we're going to do, I'm going to show you something here. I've got machine limit boundaries here. I can go to the model boundary. I can go to the material boundary. I can go to the selected vector. I don't have a vector out here to carve to. Or I could go to the selected level. I only have one level over here in my component tree. So basically, I'm down to either the material boundary or the model boundary. I'm showing you this because it does matter. Once I added this 0 plane, that's part of the model. So the material boundary and the model boundary are going to be the same because I don't have a vector out here. So let's fix that. Close, go back over, and I'm going to go select my fish. And where is it? It's down here, I believe. Yeah, there it is. I'm going to create a vector boundary around this component. Click, and now I have a vector. Now I'll go back over here. I'm going to select that vector, go into my roughing toolpath, and now it's only going to machine to this vector. It's not going to try to machine the whole piece. This is important because if I have clamps out here, I'm going to run into them. It's the same as doing the entire material boundary. Okay. Now we'll get down here into the 3D roughing strategy. We have a couple. We have 3D level, or excuse me, Z level and 3D raster. I think this is more what you were talking about, Brooks, but I don't know that 100%. Here's where you have to be careful, and you have to look at you'll have to look at your model. Okay. Z level, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be carving this entire area out level by level as determined by the, see, what have I got here? I got 1/4 inch end mill, as determined by the pass depth of this bit. So now this is going to come down and it's going to cut down level by level 1/4 inch and machine this out. Okay, I can cancel that. It may never get all the way down into here, but it's going to start missing. It's not going to carve the model. It's going to carve away all of the waste out here, most of the waste down here. You can also do 3D raster. Oh, and I should say with Z level, you can have it do a profile last, first, or not do a profile. And what I mean when we say profile, we mean carving around this vector right here. That may not be important, okay? It may not be important to do on a roughing. I tend to leave it at last. What order are we going to do it in? I go level by level. Just go level by level. Okay? I've never used depth first, so I don't know that I could give you a definitive answer as to what that is. Maybe Michael Mazzala can help me out. But I've always gone level by level. The raster angle is, we're not using a raster toolpath. We're using a Z-level toolpath. It is going to raster back and forth to remove this material. I set the angle to match the grain. With this board being vertical grain, I would set an angle of 90 degrees. Basically, that's just to kind of help avoid doing any chip out around on the outside. Because again, all of this is going to be carved away. Okay. I haven't talked about boundary offset and I haven't talked about machining allowance. I will talk about machining allowance. This allowance, in this case, 30 thousandths, that's as close as this roughing toolpath is going to get to this actual model. It's not going to force the tool to leave a 30 thousandths of an inch skin here. What it is it restricts, it keeps that bit from carving down into this model. Okay. Maurice over at Ericsson Design says, my roughing passes come down to the limits of my belt-driven CNC. Clearing enables me to run a tapered ball nose faster if I'm only removing under a 1/4 inch of material above my model. Yes. Decreasing my overall machine time. Again, yes. You can run that bit a little faster. You can plunge a little bit faster. And you're making life easier for that bit. That's the whole purpose of a roughing toolpath. Now, if we get into 3D raster strategy, the raster strategy is basically you are running it twice, the entire toolpath, because the bit's going to start out here and move back and forth like so and follow this whole model. And we're talking about when it gets up in here, it's going to come down, lift up, and follow the terrain, as it were, follow that model. So essentially, you're carving it twice. This is going to give you some very long machine times because you are essentially running a finishing toolpath twice. And you can avoid machined areas. You can set a raster angle here as well. But again, this is dependent upon the project, dependent upon the model. Okay. I tend to run Z level. And that is mainly going to be carving this area out here. It'll get close to the fish, but it's basically going to remove the skin above the top of it and then not get any closer to this model. It'll let that finishing bit do all of the work there. So that's how I work with roughing tool paths. Generally speaking, I go with Z level. 3D raster adds a lot of machine time, but it can be the better way to go. Again, if you're going with something small that's going to be held in your hand and you're going to be using a very tiny bit with a delicate tip on it, it may benefit you to use 3D raster. With in that case, I would probably go with, say, a 1/4 inch ball nose and not a standard end mill. And that will be able to get in here and get a few more of these details roughed out. But again, it comes down to the project. If this is something that's going to be on a wall 8 feet up and seen from the ground, you're probably not going to use tiny bits to do that. Probably not. So, okay, Michael has an answer for me on depth first. In this case, if at a given depth the model consists of separate regions, the generated toolpath will generate all the passes at increasing depths over such region. Then it will advance to other such regions. Okay, so in this situation then, Michael, since it's basically one region, and I don't have a fish over here and a fisherman over here and then an eagle over here, it's going to do regions first. It's going to do each region first. And okay, and then move on to the next, and then move on to the next, rather than attempting to cut them all. Okay, got it. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I've not used it, but I can see how it would come in handy. So, John Thumb is asking, can you use 2 bits on the fish, one for taking out the bulk of the material and 2 detailed work? On a roughing toolpath, you can only use 1 bit per toolpath. I'll go ahead and calculate this. I am going to set a boundary off. No, I'm not going to worry about a boundary offset. Yes, I will. I'm going to use a boundary offset that's equal to my end mill's diameter, so 0.25. And all that means, 1 decimal mark, not 2. All that means is the bit is going to go beyond the edge, beyond this vector, by 1/4 of an inch. Okay. And we'll calculate it. All right. Now you see what it's going to do at each level. We'll go ahead and preview that roughing toolpath, and that's what it's going to leave behind with those settings that we used. It's not carving the fish. It's removing a bulk of the material around the fish. And I know, Brooks, that you asked about roughing, but I'm going to get into finishing as well because it is pertinent here. When we get into the finishing toolpath, we also have 2 other strategies, offset and raster. I'm going to go with the selected vector. To answer John's question, this is where you can use more than 1 bit on your finishing toolpath. Now, there's nothing saying you can't make more than 1 roughing toolpath, but generally by the time you start getting into that, you're looking at adding quite a bit of machine time, and there's not really much benefit. So for my finishing toolpath, what I have here is a 1/4 inch bit. This parts of the dish out here and a lot of the fish itself don't really require a lot of detail, so they don't need a super tiny bit. So, but I can add another one. And let's go with an 1/8 inch ball nose. Well, let's see what I got available here for tapered ball nose bits. We'll go with a 1/16 of an inch tapered ball nose here. And we'll select that. And now this has added both of those bits there, okay? What's going to happen now is that 1/4 inch ball nose is going to get everything it can get. And everything it can't reach, like if it can't reach down in here or into the mouth down here where the gills are, it's going to do its best it can, but then keep track of what that 1/4 inch bit can't reach. Then it's going to create another tool path just for that 1/16 of an inch bit. Okay? So it's going to get in here and get all this stuff that the 1/4 inch bit can't reach. Offset versus raster. This causes a lot of confusion as well. And here is where this becomes important. You have to look at your model. If your model is like this and you have a dish, even though we've got some height here, it's going to be, there's a little bit of material to carve through. On something like this, raster is the way to go. The reason for that is raster is going to start out here and it's going to move back and forth. With the raster angle of 90 degrees, it's going to start over here close to my start point and it's going to move up and down and it's going to cut progressively deeper. That's going to be a heck of a lot easier on the bit than if I use an offset strategy. An offset strategy, it's going to start in the middle. The bit's going to come over here and it's going to plunge down to the center and start carving in a spiral. Okay? It's going to carve down to the final depth. So, if you are cutting a 3D model that has some depth down in the middle, you'll want to use a raster strategy to ease that bit down on a dish. Having said that, let me go ahead and we'll calculate this with a raster of 90. Okay. And I will preview the first one. Oops. Undo last. I meant to preview that one. Preview that tool path. You can see how that went down in there and eased its way down into the depths of that model. The 3D finish, that's all it's going to do. The 1/4 inch bit was able to get everything else. But you can see here what that little 1/16 of an inch bit is going to carve. So let's carve that. And there's our final model. Okay. Now, going with a raster toolpath in this situation, where you have a gradual incline here down to the final cutting depth, excuse me, it's best to use a raster toolpath. Okay. Let me close this and we'll do something else. John is asking, how long did that estimate to complete? It's pretty big, so let's find out. 3 hours, 40 minutes with my settings. That's for everything. So 3 hours, 40 minutes, but then again, I've got this behemoth behind me. It's a pretty robust machine, okay? So let me go back over here and we'll do something else real quick. Yes, having a big, robust machine works. It really helps out there, Rich. I'm going to go in and I'm going to add another sheet. So let's go down to my sheets layer, add new, and I'll just call it sheet 2. Go back to the design tab and I'm going to go into sheet 2. That's going to be my active sheet that I'm going to work with. Okay. So we're going to go over here to clip art And let's take a look at domes and dishes. And I'm going to go for a very, we'll go for a flat rectangle here. And I'm going to make this larger. And I'm going to go back into my design tab. Let's take a look at the 3D view and see what we got. Right now, my component, go into my components tab, it's set to merge positive. Well, if I don't want that to merge positive, if I want to cut this down into this piece of material, okay, we'll leave it at that shape height. I want to cut down into the material. So I'll change that over to subtract. And now we can see that I'm going to be dishing this out. Okay. I'm going to leave that thickness. I wouldn't cut it that thick, but I'll do that for a demonstration. And go back into my design tab. And now I'm going to take a look at all these jagged edges. And this is why I add a zero plane on every dish that I carve. Watch what happens when I add a zero plane. Boom. It fills in all those jagged edges. But now this has become a part of the model again. So let me draw a vector around it so I have a boundary. Come back over here. I'm going to select that vector. Hello. I say I'm going to select that vector. And I'm going to do a roughing toolpath. Now, for this, it's going to be a little bit easier. Okay. Simply because Z level is going to take it down pretty close. I'll go ahead and use everything that I've got here. We'll calculate it and we'll preview it. All right, there we have roughing. Now, let me go into my finishing toolpath. And it doesn't have a lot of detail. I don't need this 1/16 of an inch tapered ball nose, so I can remove that. All this could be done with the 1/4 inch ball nose. But here's what I'm talking about when I say we've got to watch what we're doing. In this case, I have nothing out here, but I've removed most of the material down to that 0.030. If I plunge down into the center, do I risk breaking the tip of this bit if I use an offset strategy? Well, it's a 1/4 inch bit, probably not. But if I haven't used that roughing toolpath, I have very much put myself at risk at breaking that bit, because on an offset strategy, just look at the little diagram. The bit's going to move over to the center, plunge all the way down, and start cutting at full depth in a circle, in a spiral rather. But I also have a very steep drop off here. I don't have that gradual dish shape. I've got a very steep drop off. This is where roughing becomes crucial, because I can in this case use a 1/4 inch ball nose, but even it has its limits. And cutting 0.72 in one pass for a 1/4 inch ball nose is probably going to be too much, unless you have a major robust machine. Okay. No. Does the finishing pass use the bit settings for depth of cut, i.e. multiple cuts for deeper cuts, or does it go to full depth on the first path? That's exactly what I'm talking about. When you are using the offset strategy, it's going to go full depth. Okay. If you use a raster strategy, it too is going to go full depth, but it's going to start out on the edge and usually ease its way in. Now, again, in this case, because we're using uh, I've already done a roughing toolpath and it's taken away most of this material, the most I'm going to end up cutting is 0.03, which is, if you can imagine the gap on a spark plug, that's about how much material is going to be left. On an older car. Nowadays, they go 0.45 and up. But let's go ahead and look at it offset and see what that's going to do. We'll calculate. Now we see right here, remember, light blue is a plunge and green is a retract. Okay? So it's going to move over here to the middle of my project, plunge down, full depth, and start carving. So here, if I didn't do a raster toolpath, or excuse me, if I didn't use a roughing toolpath, I'm at risk at breaking the bit or messing up the machine. We go back into that and take a look at it from a raster point of view with a raster angle of 90 degrees, meaning it's going to go up and down like so. Calculate. And now we can see it's going to start over here on the edge and work its way down. If we take a look, we can see all these blue lines. That's each pass. It's going to work its way down into the bottom. Okay. Without burying that bit out here somewhere in the middle of all that material. So we can preview that. And there we go. So again, it's all dependent on the project, the material, and well, it's dependent on the project and the material. I could just say that. Something like this, I would definitely use a roughing toolpath with. Now, I know people that don't use roughing toolpaths at all, but these are people who have big, robust machines. Then they have bits that can handle it, and you also got to look at your materials. If you're doing hard maple or hickory or purple heart or something of that nature, you're going to want to use a roughing toolpath. When you're into softer woods, like, oh, say cherry, not that cherry is a soft wood, but it's a heck of a lot softer than maple or even oak. You can be a little bit more aggressive. And maybe, yeah, you don't need to do a roughing toolpath. But I know a lot of people that don't use roughing toolpaths at all. They just let the tapered ball nose handle it all. And tapered ball noses are pretty robust bits. They can handle a lot of punishment. But again, look at the tip diameter. If you've got, because let me grab one here real quick. Boy, I gotta get out here and clean up. That's all there is to it. Where are you? There. Nope, that's not it. Yes, there you are. This has a tip diameter of 0.5 millimeter. That's almost hypodermic needle. I run the risk of breaking that if I just go plunging in a 1/2 inch and start carving. Okay. I'm going to use a roughing toolpath when I'm using this bit. Trust me. And I'm only going to use this bit when I really, really need to use it. So I know that's more than you wanted to know, Brooks, but there you go. That's why I do what I do, and that's how I do what I do. So, let's see here. Kimberly West wants to know, have I used or seen Bamex? I've seen it, but I've not used it. It looks a little pricey to me, but a lot of things are pricey. So, yeah, I'm cheap. I'm Scottish. It's genetic, but yeah, poster poster child for tetanus shots. Yeah, and yes, tapered ball nose bits bite, and they bite hard. So so do V bits. They bite hard as well. So let's see here. Where do you stand on TBCs with same shaft size versus drop shaft size? That makes sense. It doesn't. I don't know what a TBC is. Um, you might have to expand on that. You might have to expand on that. Um, I know what a TBN is, but not a TBC. I missed a question up here. I'm trying to scroll up to find. Um, um, no, 8th Center, you cannot post links. YouTube won't allow you to. Let's see here. Okay. Erickson was asking what was the size of the ball nose and the stepper settings did I use for the fish? For 3D models, let me bring this back and we'll go back over here. Back into 2D view and we'll go back over to the fish. I don't know why I did that. Close that. And what did I use? For the 1/4 inch tapered ball nose, click on edit. I went with an 8% step over. I generally go with less than 10%, but depending upon the model, I have been known to go down into 4%. It just depends on what it is, the model and the project. So, yeah, it just depends on the project. Again, like I said, if it's a 2-foot diameter barn star that's going to be mounted up in the eave of your roof, 14 feet up off the ground, um, it doesn't need that much detail. I can use a 1/2 inch ball nose on that, and I'll still use about an 8% step over and get something that's good. But again, if I'm doing something like the lid of a jewelry box, I'm going to go for a pretty small step over. And this, I know a lot of people don't like me saying this, but it is the truth to me. Um, I would much rather spend an extra half hour with on them in machine time than spend 2 hours sanding and cleaning it up by hand. I'm not in production, okay? I don't have to get out 100 projects in a day. I can afford to take that time, but I have to prioritize my time. And I'll be honest, I'm not just sitting here watching the bit go back and forth, although I still do that sometimes, depending upon what else I got going on. If this is over here, um, if this is over here carving away, I'm over on the table saw 9 times out of 10 cutting out more stuff. So, I generally, like I said, I've been known to go down to 4%, but usually it's less than 10. In fact, almost always less than 10. However, depending upon what you're doing, that can add texture to a project that really looks cool, whether you mean it to or not. If you're doing something like this fish, it's not desirable to have that texture. I get it. But if you play around in here a little bit, you can put a texture in the background. At a wider step over is then that can work to your benefit, you know? So let's see here. Now I got to get back to this one because someone was asking about epoxy inlays, and I don't want there to be a bunch of confusion. Let me find it. Okay. Daddy-O Dadinator. One of the coolest names ever. Looking on how to do a clearing pass after pouring epoxy. You're doing a straight surfacing tool path. I have 2 videos on my channel that talk about surfacing, my way of doing it. It's not the best way. It's not the right way. It's not the wrong way. It's my way and it works for me. I will link it in the description as soon as we're finished live. Just writing myself a note, and I will put it in the description of this live stream as soon as we're done live here. Okay. So I also will put a link to the playlist. Just wrote myself a note for that. I'll put a link to the playlist for all of my epoxy videos. It's I believe there are 4 videos and several live streams. The live streams with Shane Peters and Rob Sandstrom are worth every minute of your time. Believe me, I have learned more about epoxy inlays from those 2 people than I have from anybody else. And you'll find links to their channels, links to their social media in the description of those 2 live streams. But fair warning, epoxy is addictive. It's expensive, but it's fun. Okay, let's see here. I think that was here we go. John Thumb says, sometimes when I preview selected tool path, it does not show the cut and freezes. Does anyone else experience this? That is usually down to your computer resources. Okay. Generally speaking, Vectric software doesn't take a lot of computer resources, but when you start working with 3D, it really does. It really does. And it's not so much to do, it is to do with memory. So if you can add RAM, by all means do it. But take a look at your video card. Because when I had to get a new computer, oh man, 3, 4, 5 years back, about 4 years back. That was about the time Vectric did some major work under the hood and changed how a few things work. And it became, when you're working with 3D, it became a little bit more resource dependent. So I went to a gaming PC that had a pretty robust video card on it. My problems went away because I would have things hang up. Now, Kimberly also makes an excellent point here. 2 things that have to do with that resource consumption are your modeling resolution and your display resolution. And we'll get into that right now. It's pretty pretty straightforward. What I'm talking about is over here in job setup. Okay. Now, I did it wrong. I have a 3D model out here. 99 times out of 100 down here in modeling resolution, when I have a 3D model in the design, I will bring it up to very high, 7 times slower. That's pretty high resolution, okay? And all that means is the 3D model that's brought out here, it's it it's going to be the surface of the material is divided into 4 million points. Think of a picture that you're working in an imaging software, Photoshop or what have you. You know about pixels. This setting right here divides the surface of the material into 4 million pixels. Quite a bit. But there are others, and people get in trouble with this. I'm showing you so you can avoid trouble. Hold down Shift, go back into Job Setup, and now all of a sudden, I have 2 more. I have extremely high, which is 20 times slower, and maximum, which is 50 times slower. Click on maximum, and now the surface of my material is divided into 16 million points. That's all well and good, but you're also using a lot more resources, and you're also taking longer to machine. You're taking longer to render here in the software, and you're taking longer to calculate for not a lot of benefit on something of this size. I have only used this resolution one time, and that was when I was kind of sort of doing a prototype. Somebody wanted to do a casting in wax. And so I carved the wax mold for their positive. So all of it, the whole project was about the size of a quarter, which is, oh, let's see, I don't know how many millimeters that is. So, you know, it's genuinely speaking not required. Okay, Brooks Martin says, all of my 3D models creations are at 50x. I've got a strong PC. You're also using resources you probably don't need to use. But hey, if it works for you, be my guest. For this, you need a seriously, seriously robust PC. Okay? I don't use it. Generally, the max I go with is 7. Okay? Now, I just changed this. You notice I didn't get an error message saying you need to recalculate the toolpaths, even though the material setup has changed. That's because these were imported when I was at the standard resolution. Changing this after I have imported a model does not change the resolution of the model that's already here. Okay? So if I really wanted this at very high, I would have to delete these models and re-import them. The other thing that could be using up a bunch of your resources is up here in, let's see, is it toolpaths? Yes, your preview simulation quality. You'll notice I have mine set to standard. And that is the preview out here in the 3D view. It's set to standard, and that's why you will occasionally see some pixelizing out here. This has nothing to do with the actual model itself. This is just the display that we're looking at. Okay? I could go all the way up to maximum, and on my design computer, I have it on maximum. The reason I have this on standard is because, again, it slows everything down, and I'm trying to demonstrate toolpaths out here. I don't need super high resolution to demonstrate the toolpaths and what have you. So My point being, your modeling resolution and go into the toolpaths menu, preview simulation quality. These two can work against you when it comes to it appearing to hang up while you're previewing a model. Let me go back into the preview toolpaths again. Also, you have the speed. It may behoove you to slow it down to give the computer more time to run these calculations. You also have animating the preview and drawing the tool. You may not need to draw the tool. I do here because I'm demonstrating. But you, in your design environment, you probably don't need to draw the tool. So if I click on this, select that one, and I preview it, well, the speed was so fast, undo last. It's drawing the tool and it's animating the tool path. Well, I can turn that off so it's not drawing the tool, and that helps. But when I'm inside on the computer designing, I don't need to see it animated. I don't need to see the tool. I just want to see the end result. Well, I can't change a lot of this because it's already running, but I can speed it up. And there we did that. Let me undo that. And let me get rid of animate the preview. That's going to save some resources as well. And now with the 3D roughing selected, I'll preview it, and boom, look how fast that was. So you don't have to animate the preview. You don't have to draw the tool. And you don't have to do super, super high quality. About the only time that I will use this is if I'm going to save a preview picture. If I'm going to save a preview image, then I will use a high preview simulation. And again, on my computer in the house, this is set to the highest, the maximum. But if I'm going to send a preview photo, I will probably use that higher resolution. And then once I'm done with the previews, preview visible, shaboom. See how fast that previewed, Kurt? And if I'm going to send a preview, I'll kind of put it at a jaunty angle like so. Get it out here to where it's kind of in the middle. I can see all the corners. Save a preview image and send that image to the client, the customer, whoever. Okay. That's about the only time I ever use those really high resolutions out here. Okay. Let's see. Are there situations where showing the tool won't show up the tool? I had that issue the other day. Not sure if it's a glitch or not, but I needed to check start points and end points. And it would have been easier to see them on the show tool thing rather than going into every single diamond engraving. It can, but let me go bring this back and we'll reset our preview, go back up to the top. And we'll just use the roughing here. I'm going to bring the speed way down. Come on. Oh, you're not going to let me do that, are you? Do last. You're not going to let me do it. You're not going to let me turn the speed down. You dog. What I was going to say was you have all your play and pause controls here when you're working with these tool paths. Now you can play, pause. You have to be quick. I'm not sure why it's not letting me turn down the speed of this preview. Oh, I can see animate. Now it'll let me do it. So you will want to animate the preview. Let's reset it, slow it way down. And when you start previewing, you can pause. You're going to make me a liar. You're going to make me a liar. Okay, that's fine. Maybe it'll only allow me to pause it while I've got the tool drawn. Undo last. Slow it down. There we go. I have to be animating the tool. Okay. So now, if you're looking at doing something within the, let me go ahead and I paused it. Bring it all the way up, undraw the tool and undo the animate. Play, let it get done. Reset the preview. If you're looking at doing something out here in the 2D view, what I generally do is I will draw a circle equal to the size of my tool. Boom, close, and then I will try to fit that into the nooks and crannies you're trying to get in there. So yeah, watching the tool is fun. And if you got the time, go for it. But generally speaking, I don't need to know where the tool is going to go because I can see where it's going to go by looking at the tool paths. And something else to remember, in version 12, remember you can turn on the vectors over here. If you have a bitmap, you can turn on the bitmap over there. Okay. So my vector's out here. That's how far, that's how close to my vector this roughing toolpath is going to get. Uncheck that. We'll check the 3D finish. That's a big one. That's going to go all the way out past that vector. Okay. Uncheck that. Check here. That's only going to do the little details that 1/4 inch end mill couldn't get. Okay. So I don't know if that was any help for you or not. John says, I'm afraid to not watch it. That's when bad things happen in my world. Well, you know, if you're talking about out on the machine, I do. I am here. I'm not one of those people that has a baby monitor or a webcam or something like that. Start the machine, then leave. I don't do that. That's also why I have a bad reputation with a lot of people in that for instance, each one of these would be its own toolpath in its own piece of G code because then I'm in control. I say when I'm going to run that piece of G code. Okay. Because if I want to run my roughing toolpath, then go in the house and make a sandwich, come back out, and believe me, there's nothing more satisfying than eating a sandwich watching the machine run. But if I want to go in the house, make a sandwich, come back out here, then start the next tool path, do my first finishing tool path, I can sit here and munch away and watch it, then get up and get back on the table saw. I'm here within it, within the shop. I'm not in the house pretending to watch it. Okay. I don't leave this unattended. I may not always be able to save a project, but I haven't burned my shop down and I haven't crashed the machine to the point that I couldn't fix it. It's just me. You wouldn't run your table saw without you being there. I won't run this without me being here. So, and I'm with you, Jared. More satisfying to watch the tool while it's cutting. Yep. Jim Brown says you can draw in 3D in version 12 also. Yes, you can. And more drawing tools are coming in 12.5. I can say that. Let's see. I love watching my CNC do a 3D carve. I'll watch it for hours. If you've got the time, I mean, I have a neighbor, and we're going to wrap this up pretty quick. I have a neighbor who hates my new shop and he hates the new CNC because from his house, he can't hear him. Did I call him a new neighbor? He's not a new neighbor. I have a neighbor who hates the new shop and the new CNC. This guy I would turn on the router and fire up the CNC, and the minute he heard that router kick on, he was over in the doorway of my shop just watching. And I kept trying to tell, look, we can build you one of these. Nope, don't want nothing to do with it. Just want to watch yours. Well, he hasn't got to watch my CNC router since I built the shop because he can't hear it. And this is so much quieter than my old CNC with the Porter cable router on it. He hates it. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to do a carve. No, never mind. You ruined it for me. Okay. So, Kimberly Went says, Kyle said end of April. Kyle doesn't know. Nobody but Vectric knows. I hate to call Kyle out, but on this case, nobody but Vectric knows. Kyle does not know when 12.5 is going to be released. They have said spring of 2025. That's as close as they've gotten. And I'll be honest with you, it may be a little bit later than that. It depends. It may be a little bit later than that. It might be late spring. It might be early summer because there are a few things still going on. But yep. All right, let's go ahead. Well, you don't know whether or not he is psychic. Most people who are don't share it. If he was, he wouldn't be working. So 12.5 is Aspire and not VCarve Pro. No, 12.5 is all the way across the board. 12.5 is all the way across the board. They do upgrades, and this is considered an in-family upgrade. So if you have version 12, you will get version 12.5 upgrade for free. And believe me, they will let you know. Here's the only way you know when the software is coming, when you're getting close to it. Here's the only way you'll know. You will see on their social media, Instagram, Facebook, what have you, you'll see posts or stories showing you some of the new things. So you'll have coming soon in 12.5, this toolpath, or you can now do this in the 3D view. You're generally speaking within a week or two. So, and then you'll wake up one morning and your YouTube feed will be flooded with tutorials because every tutorial they've done for version 12, they're going to do it again for 12.5 because there probably will be differences. So that's all I can say about that. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. Next week, I'm going to hope to have a video, but I'm not going to promise it. Okay. So much going on in the background. It's not even funny. I hope like I could have a video next week. What I'm going to do is I've decided I'm going to pick up where I left up on the version 12 for Absolute Beginner Series. Just pick up and carry on. So the next video will be part 11 of that series. Channel members. Tomorrow is going to be kind of a mishmash grab bag. Got a lot of stuff I want to talk about. A lot of things kind of been on the back burner. So, and it's not going to be Aspire only. It will be VCarve and Aspire. I did see a question here from one of our members. Oh, come on. I got to find it. Man, Anyway, was wondering about getting into the super secret Facebook and learning the secret handshake and what have you. Check out all of my members only live streams. You'll find my email address in the description of all of my members only. There it is. Having joined last week, how do I get on the Facebook page? Do I need to learn a special handshake? Yes. That's what I'm saying. Go to any of the members only live streams, look in the description, you'll find my email address. Email me a link to your Facebook profile, and we'll get it in action. So, if you don't know what I'm talking about and going on about or anything, or if you'd like some information on channel membership, if you look right down below this video panel, you will see join. Click on join. You're not joining anything yet, but click on join, and a panel is going to pop up. The video is going to play to tell you all about channel membership. We have a great group of folks who are multi-talented in several different disciplines, not just CNC, but we got laser folks who are doing some killer stuff. We've got 3D printers folks who are doing some amazing stuff. We're just, if it has anything to do with anything making, especially, CNC involved, we're into it. We'd love to have you join. Members, also remember to check the community/memberships tab for the link to tomorrow night's members only live stream. And see you tomorrow, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern, as usual. For the rest of you, I'll see you next Sunday for sure, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, over this same YouTube channel. Going through the Rolodex in my brain to make sure I've got everything going. For those of you who partake, have a great St. Patrick's Day tomorrow. For those that don't participate, have a great Monday tomorrow. Here's hoping we'll see you next week, y'all. And let's keep all the folks affected by these tornadoes in our hearts and prayers. And until next time, y'all take care.